Candidates for this year's Zimbabwe historical elections being held next week, Monday, continue to trickle into the fore, and they continue to campaign around the country as the elections get closer. Our SABC colleagues are in the country to cover the various campaigns, the final rallies, election day, and of course the announcement of the results. Now let's cross to Tsepiso Makwetla. She is in Bulawayo, Zimbabwe. So Tsepiso, as they say in Bulawayo, Uvukile, and how are you doing there?
I'm good, Leanne. Interesting enough, I was thinking that it started off as a very cold day, but the sun seems to be thawing the elements, the cold conditions, and I wonder if that's the case in terms of Bulawayo, very emotive name for a region that has been considered not only the bastion of resistance, but there's a deep history, what ZANU-PF was talking about the other day as the politics of hurt. And there is no place that can relate better to that than Bulawayo, and Matebele land. We'll tell you a little bit more about it. But just in terms of the preparations, what is happening today, we're expecting political parties to gather, especially the opposition, at Homestead this morning at 10 to chart the way forward, not only ensuring that there is a vigilance in election monitoring and the final process and pre-election, but also to talk about possible cooperation post the elections. And Leanne, I just want to bring you into what Zimbabweans, especially in Bulawayo, waking up to this morning. So it's the newspaper headlines. If I could just get Tsepiso to focus on it. New Day. And they're talking about the MDC-T leader, who's the leader of the opposition alliance, and Nelson Chamisa, talking about power transfer deal sealed. He is saying that the imminent transfer of power has been legally hammered out. The framework is in place, and that when the MDC wins this election, that there will be no problems at all. Further goes on to talk about how Chamisa has accused ZANU-PF of killing Morgan Tsvangirai. But I want to come back to that historical significance, just in terms of the underlying current of what the region here is probably thinking and feeling inside this newspaper as well. You'll find a story about the AU Goodwill Ambassador Nyaradzai Gonzenda, who's saying that you cannot talk about a new dawn until ED apologizes for the Gukaruhundi massacres. And I want to introduce you to a colleague, journalist IsiNdebele, who is not only a documentary maker, but he's looked really deep into the Gukaruhundi massacres, their significance. And this is the stickler point, Zenzele, just in terms of how Matebele land as a whole is going to vote. Would you agree with that?
Yes, I totally agree with it, because I think for Matebele and Gukaruhundi is still an issue, especially looking at the situation that a person like Emmerson Mnangagwa, who once said the problem of cockroaches, and they decided to bring in DDT, referring to Gukaruhundi and saying that those who follow the path of ZANU-PF will have their days added on earth, is now the leader. Also look at the Minister of Agriculture, Perence Shiri, who was known as Black Jesus then, because he could decide who lives and who dies, is the commander of the 5th Brigade. We have the Chiwenga, who was the commander of one brigade, which was giving logistics to the 5th Brigade. So the guys who were in the middle of the drive, the machines of the killing machines of the 5th Brigade, are today looking for votes in Matebele land. And these are the people who have refused to apologize. President Mugabe, the former president, said it was a moment of madness. Emmerson Mnangagwa keeps on saying, let bygones be bygones. But for people of Matebele land who still live with relatives who have scars, who are still injured, who don't know what happened to the relatives, this, when they go to the ballot, this will be a referendum on Mugabe, and they will be actually thinking of their relatives, and Gukaruhundi will be a big issue in this election.
Zenzele, I want to talk about the dynamics, because we've seen, according to some of the polls, suggesting that it's a two-horse race in terms of the elections, that 40% are looking to vote for ZANU-PF. MDC is said to have 37%, but there is a significant 20% of undecided voters. has ED or President Mnangagwa's message of let's move on, my role in the Gukurahundi massacres was exaggerated, is that filtering through, do you think? And I also want to talk about that against the backdrop of that explosion we saw at the presidential campaign rally he had not so long ago, about a month ago.
Okay, yeah, this is very interesting. Maybe let me start with the explosion at the White Seat, because it goes back to Mugabe's era. Sometime in November, just before the last weekend before Emmerson Mnangagwa was fired by President Mugabe, there was a rally which was addressed by ZANU-PF, and Mugabe was there. Grace Mugabe was booed, and Mugabe accused Emmerson Mnangagwa of hiring people to come and boo his wife. And at that rally, he actually said, if I made a mistake by making you a vice president, we will deal with that. And we know that a few days later, he was fired. But what was interesting at that rally was when Emmerson Mnangagwa stood up to greet people, for some reason he stood up and greeted people in Ndebele. And he got a lot of cheers from the people because of the language he had used, and that did not go down with Mugabe. But then you then find that interesting. Fast forward to 2018, you then find that Emmerson Mnangagwa comes back to White City. He tries to have a rally for the first time, and there's an explosion, and it's in White City. But you can also go back to 9 November 1980. There was a rally at the White City Stadium, and then a minister in the Mugabe government, who was known as Inosinkala, at that particular rally said, we are fed up with ZAPU, they are now our enemy, and I urge you to do something about them. If it means delivering a bit of a blow, we are going to do that. And what followed then was violence between ZANU-PF supporters and ZAPU supporters, which led to entumbane battles between ZIPRA and ZANU forces. So White City has always been at the center of this controversy. And it is also interesting that the first rally that Emmerson Mnangagwa tries to have in Bulawayo, there is an explosion. And the interesting part is that the first interview that Emmerson Mnangagwa has after that with state television, the reporter asks him, do you think the people of Bulawayo are responsible for this? Of course, he said the people of Bulawayo love me. But you find a narrative that this is a dissident city. These are the people who have not voted for ZANU-PF, and probably they are involved. And looking at the numbers, I think, this is my opinion, and many other people might not agree with me. I think Emmerson Mnangagwa's message is getting to a number of people. ZANU-PF has largely been supported in rural areas, and there has not been any evidence that these people have now turned to Nelson Chamisa. So he has a bit of an edge because he's the sitting president. He has opened up a lot of things, and a lot of people internationally are saying, Zimbabwe is coming back to the fold, is joining the EU, the Commonwealth. There is a bit of business flowing, there is a bit of hope, and that gives them an advantage, because other people would say, well, let's try the devil that we know than the young person that we don't know.
I need to talk about this term narratives, because as journalists, I think it's very important that we reflect on all sides of the story. There's many truths as there are as many facts. There's been a sense by media monitors, for instance, that there has been a very urban bias of reportage of elections in Zimbabwe, and some of that has been vilifying ZANU-PF because of the legacy of President Mugabe's tenure.
Yeah, it might be true to a certain extent, but I don't think there's a way we can separate Robert Mugabe's government from Emmerson Mnangagwa's leadership, because he was part of it. But also you find that there are people in rural areas. Let's talk, for example, the urban areas. If you have to give it to Emmerson Mnangagwa that there is a bit of press freedom. Journalists are working freely. I have not heard of any journalists being arrested in this election. We have about 46 of Zeba missions that are here, which was something that was not heard of during the Mugabe era. So the people in urban areas are angry because of inflation, because of unemployment, and they don't reflect the majority of the Zimbabweans. And they are not the majority. 60% of Zimbabweans live in rural areas. And those are the people who are going to decide who's the next president of this country.
Zenzele, thank you very much. So, Leanne, we come back to you in the final days of Zimbabwe's election. The ZEC has said that it's all systems go, that everything is in place, and really really is up to us to bring as many of those views and developments on the ground as possible. But from Bulawayo, the final stages and preparations for all political parties are underway. We will go out onto the streets and especially speak to the youth. Remember, they're the highest demographic in the African continent in general. But for Zimbabwe, it's a very, very important factor for a country that says it is transforming and it is growing.